Today we're going to talk about what shiny stuff we can give our officers to give us the best chance of victory on the battlefield. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today's video sees us looking at the Imperial Guard relics. In this video we'll be looking at all of the relics from the Codex, including the regiment specific ones, and we'll also be looking at the relics from the Vigilus detachments as well. I'm not going to do the specific relics for the Militarum Tempestus Scion regiments, as I just feel that they're a little bit niche, and we've already been over them when we reviewed the Scion rules for Psychic Awakening. I've arranged these relics into 3 different tiers, a lowest tier, middle tier and best tier. Of course entirely down to my own opinion, so please let me know down below if you think I've ranked anything too high or too low. Unlike some armies such as Space Marines, we only get the option of having 3 relics in the army, so we really do have to be selective and only choose the ones that are best. A lot of these relics are quite good fun, but if they're stopping you taking something that was better, in reality they are likely to hold you back a bit. So let's take a look at what I feel are the less good relics in the Imperial Guard Codex. Starting out, we have the Emperor's Benediction. This is a 3-shot bolt pistol with AP-1 and damage 2. In all honesty, as a damage dealer it's not terrible. It could be worse on a commander bailing out of a Chimera or a Valkyrie, but anti-infantry firepower is something that we have in spades. I don't think that this one's almost ever going to make a difference as to whether or not you win or lose a game. Next up we have the Armageddon Steel Legion relic, the Skull Mask of Acheron. This would probably be my pick for the worst relic in the Codex. It's basically a -1 leadership aura within 3 inches of the enemy, and -2 if you're fighting orcs. -1 leadership isn't a great debuff in the first place, a lot of armies ignore it, and having to get your officer right up close is certainly bad as well. And having -2 to orcs is rarely relevant, as they often travel in mobs of 30 strong, giving them leadership 30, and they really aren't going to care about -2 leadership. This one certainly doesn't do the Steel Legion any favours whatsoever. Next I've lumped together 3 relic power swords, the Mammoth Tusk Blade, the Blade of Conquest, and the Claw of the Desert Tigers. All of these moderately increase your company commander's damage output. You have to buy the power sword, then this is a damage output upgrade for it. The Tusk Blade is the Kadian relic, its strength +2, AP -3 and flat damage 2. The Blade of Conquest is strength +2, so usually strength 5, AP -4 and damage D3. And the Claw of the Desert Tigers is a basic power sword with damage 2, and you get 2 extra attacks. All of them have their pros and cons, but the biggest con for all of them is that they're scarcely any better than a Power Fist, which you can almost always take on your fighty commanders. If it's a choice between paying 4 points and a relic, or paying 8 points and getting a Power Fist, and saving your relic slot for something else, then you may as well do it. Don't get me wrong, these are all slightly better than Power Fists in my opinion, but only slightly, and that's just not enough to justify a relic slot. I'd put these as more sort of fun relics for giving your company commanders a bit of interesting punch in a bit more of a casual game, but I wouldn't use them in any sort of competitive match. Unless you're playing Kadian or something, you very rarely want to be charging your company commanders onto the front lines to try and do damage to the enemy. And if you are playing Kadian, then the strength 8 power fists are really something that you don't want to be passing up if you are desperate for your company commanders to get stuck into the Xenos. Finally, I've decided to include the company commander durability upgrades in this low tier as well. We have the Armour of Graftishenko, the Vostroyan relic that gives your platoon commander a 2+ save and toughness 4, the Order of the Iron Star of Mordian, which gives them a 4+ feel no pain type shrug off, and I'm afraid I forgot to write it, but I'd also put the Shield of Mortwald, the 3+ invul save for a company commander from the Emperor's Blade Assault Company, the one with Chimeras and Tauruxes, here as well. Now don't get me wrong, these things aren't particularly bad. If you are worried about snipers, then actually the Armour of Graftishenko and the Order of the Iron Star of Mordian could come in handy situationally. I'm really not the biggest fan of the Shield of Mortwald though. The 3+ invul save dissipates the first time that you fail a save, meaning it's got a 1/3 chance of just going pop instantly and not saving you any damage whatsoever. The main reason that puts me off these, and the reason that I wouldn't personally use these in games, is that almost always you can put a company commander out of line of sight at the back of your army, or if the opponent doesn't have snipers, you can just literally stand them behind another infantry unit or something like that. I think it's rare that a company commander is worth the effort of investing to protect them with this sort of relic. I generally advise putting your warlord on something that's lurking towards the back most of the time, rather than charging it up into the midfield, and most units that you can take these on are pretty cheap. Company commanders are only 30 points for example, so I honestly just wouldn't waste a relic to protect them, and just wish them the best of luck with their refractor field. I'd say the biggest niche for them is if you have a company commander who's your warlord, you absolutely need to advance them into the midfield to deliver their buff or whatever else they're planning on doing, and the enemy has a significant sniper threat that means that you might get them killed. Next up we move on to the middle tier of relics, and we'll start off with the Raimondi null emitter. This is one that's locked to the Tempestus Scion drop force, and I'm afraid I misread the rules for this one. I thought it was better than it was. I would now put it in the lower tier on closer examination. The rules for this one are that if the bearer is affected by a psychic power, you roll a dice, and on a 2+ the bearer is no longer affected. This one's basically going to be on a Tempestor Prime. There's nowhere else that you can take it. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of feasibility that your Tempestor Prime might be targeted by psychic powers, but it's hardly a prime target for either debuffing or smiting to death. I guess best case scenario, you could literally use him as a screen to drop in front of Grey Knights or Thousand Suns and make sure that they can't smite some of your units for a turn, so I suppose it could be a situational buy-in. The vast majority of the time though, this really isn't going to have any effect in the game whatsoever. When using psychic powers, Tempestor Primes definitely wouldn't be at the top of my list to try and snipe out, and particularly if your opponent knows that you've got this, then they'll just target something else anyway. Moving on into the actual useful stuff, we have the Agravada class Orbital Tracker. This one's the relic from the Emperor's Wrath Artillery Company, and it is pretty useful. Basically you pick one of the Emperor's Wrath units within 6 inches, and that unit can ignore cover when it shoots this turn. That will be a Hydra, Basilisk or Wyvern. And the best thing about using this with the Emperor's Wrath Company is that you can pay the 2 command points for that exact same artillery piece to fire twice, doubling down on the benefit that this provides. Ignores cover is particularly powerful for the Wyvern, who has no AP, and it really allows it to do its job of chewing through infantry just that bit better. I think that this one's a common and easy one to include in your list, but I have chosen to put it in the middle tier, as it isn't the most enormous buff in the whole world, but it will have a smaller but positive effect turn on turn. Next we have the Litanies of the Holy Synod. This one's the one from the Emperor's Conclave Infantry Company, and you give it to a Minister and Priest. Basically any unit within 6 inches can roll 2 dice and pick the lowest when they take a morale test, and if the bearer is slain, then you choose one unit within 6 inches, and that unit gets +1 attack, and ignores leadership for the rest of the game. I quite like this one, as it both gives you some morale boosts, and if your priest does get eliminated, then you basically get to keep his effects for 1 unit for the rest of the battle, so it gives you a little bit of insurance as to him getting sniped out or killed in combat. Again, it's not overwhelming, but it's certainly useful, and not a bad relic to include. Next up we have the Tempestus Scion unique relic, the Tactical Auto Reliquary of Tiberius. This one's nice and simple. You use it on your Tempestor Prime, and you roll a dice. On a 2+, he can issue an additional order this turn. We all like orders. This is one way to get a whole load more over the course of the game. Again, it's not outstanding, but it will give you a meaningful increase to your army's abilities. Next we have Petrova's Mark 45, which is another relic bolt pistol, but you really don't take it for its damage output, though if you are interested, it's a bolt pistol with strength 4, AP -1, 2 damage and 2 shots. The actual reason that you want to take it, it's the Valhallan unique relic by the way, is that it's basically your blam pistol for executing conscripts and keeping them fearless. The exact rule is that when you take a morale test, no more than 1 model can flee due to battle shock for Valhallan units within 6 inches of the model. It's pretty solid in an advancing Valhallan battle line, as leadership can be one of the ways that they can lose a few more casualties, but it is really impressive with the conscripts, which counters one of their biggest weaknesses, the fact that they run away very easily. I've used this one on numerous occasions myself, having conscripts in a big unit that just won't run away, and you can layer all sorts of defensive buffs on them. It's actually really quite powerful, and can certainly give you some solid objects to gum up the midfield with in the way that infantry squads just aren't quite as good at, due to being picked apart a bit more piecemeal, the enemy being able to choose which squads are the ones they need to eliminate most that turn. Incidentally though, it is also very good for big combined infantry squads, again countering their tendency to run away when they suffer mass casualties. Next we have the Death Mask of Lanius, and this is one that I've had a lot of fun with in the past, when you could, under the rules, equip it on an Ogrim bodyguard, give him a Slab Shield, and it would give them a 2+ invul save all game. It took Games Workshop a very long time to fix that for how much of a dumb thing it was, but I'm afraid they have now fixed that in the FAQ. The Slab Shield no longer boosts its invul save unfortunately. Basically this one gives you a 4+ invul save, and once per game you can regenerate D3 wounds on the model that's lost those wounds. I've included this one here rather than down in the lower tier because you can still take it on the Ogrim bodyguard with the Slab Shield, so you can have a tough little critter with a 2+ armor save, 4+ invul save, and once per game regenerate those wounds. He can still be an absolute thorn in your opponent's side and take a significant amount of shooting to bring him down, though he isn't quite as silly as he used to be. I've got to admit I really enjoyed my 2+ invul save Ogrim bodyguard with the dumb rules interaction, and the fun times that could be had with the opponent just dumping their entire army's firepower into him for a turn, while he sits there and laughs off the damage. Finally, we come to the Laurels of Command, another decent order mechanic, where it gives you the chance to issue an additional order to the same unit. This can be really quite helpful. You could maybe get reroll 1s to hit and to wound, or maybe combine first rank fire with take aim or something. It's best with models with a lot of orders, so it's particularly good with any warlord traits such as the Kadian one or Master of Command. Moving on now to the relics that I think are the best in Codex Astra Militarum. First up we have the Dagger of Tusark, which is a really useful little infantry relic. To be honest, I was a little uncertain as to whether or not to put it at the top of tier 2 or towards the bottom of this tier, but I went for the top tier in the end as I do think it's potentially very useful. Basically this one can be given to an infantry officer only, and during deployment you can put this infantry officer and a unit of the same regimental keyword, if the officer has one, in Deep Strike Reserve and come in as an outflank sort of move within 6 inches of the table edge and outside 9 inches of the enemy. This can be a very easy way to get an alpha strike on some outlying opposing forces. Things like plasma veterans are a really good shout for this, as they'll also have an officer alongside them to reroll 1s to hit on their plasma guns or give them another order if they need it. It feels like it's sort of made for a platoon commander, as they'll have one order to issue to that one infantry unit that you've chosen to outflank. Guard often struggles just a little bit for getting units to the back of enemy lines, and this one's a very decent alternative to things like scions. Other than veterans, other reasonable targets could just be an infantry squad to try and gum up enemy units on an objective, maybe charge tanks or score objectives in the backfield, perhaps Death Corps of Krieg combat engineers, to get them to unleash their horrific carcass shots at close range for guarantees, and it also could be pretty funny with a huge unit of conscripts, who with their weight of numbers might well be able to take an objective for multiple turns, even from right under your opponent's nose. There's one interesting play that you can do with this one by giving it to the officer of the fleet, who does have the officer keyword, and then you can allow him to outflank any infantry unit in the entire Guard Codex that doesn't have a regimental keyword. For example, you could maybe take a huge unit of Bulgarin and put them in reserve and get them right up close and personal to the enemy on turn 2. I'm not saying that this is always going to be the best idea, but it's certainly something else different that you could do with Bulgarin, and you guarantee them to at least have the chance of making a 9-inch charge turn 2, even if it's not entirely likely to succeed, even with a command reroll. Next up we have the Kadian unique relic, the Relic of Lost Cadia. Against all armies this is just a generically strong relic and a reasonable include, but against Chaos it basically gives you the shooting phase that every guardsman would pray to the Emperor for. Basically you activate the relic once per battle at the start of one of your turns. Over the course of that turn, any Kadian units that are within 6 inches of the bearer can reroll 1s to hit and wound. That's both in the shooting phase and in close combat, though typically in the shooting phase it's going to be where it counts more. Now Kadians do get to reroll 1s to hit normally if they do stay still, but just having the benefit of reroll 1s to wound on top of that for a turn can actually be really quite decent, particularly if you park him in the middle of, say, an Imperial Guard tank line, or in your artillery segment, where you'll certainly give them a far stronger shooting phase than they otherwise would have. You really can fit quite a lot of units in that 6-inch bubble if you cluster up a bit. It could also be kind of nice with moving and advancing Kadian units, as it basically allows them to still get their reroll 1s, even on a turn that they've moved, and of course you get to reroll 1s to wound as well. So it can be a good way of increasing the Kadian's mobility, while also keeping the reroll 1s to hit, and giving them the reroll 1s to wound as well. It really is against Chaos that it absolutely goes through the roof though, because instead of just rerolling 1s to hit and wound, you reroll all failed to hit rolls and all failed to wound rolls. This is basically old Guilliman style rerolls in a 6-inch aura in your guard army that never usually gets the chance to obtain this. In a good shooting phase this can absolutely be game winning against Chaos and really turn the game into an uphill struggle for them. Ideally you want to be using it as early as possible, ideally with a maximally effective shooting phase where you've got a whole load of units lining up beads on key targets. Ideally you'd normally be wanting to get your tanks in on this, as they have the biggest, most meaningful guns, so buffing their damage massively is really helpful. but have had some great success with Kadian Guardsmen first rank firing, second rank firing, as all of those strength 3 hits when you're re-rolling full rolls to wounds get an ungodly amount of wounds on the enemy. It's a real draw to playing Kadian to be able to access a relic that basically gives you a game on easy mode when you're fighting chaos, which is at least reasonably regularly. Never mind the fact that you can also use Vengeance for Kadian the stratagem on another unit in your army that's outside this aura. Moving on, we come to the Hammer of Sunderance. This is the flat damage 3 battle cannon from the Vigilus detachment, the Emperor's Fist Tank Company. We've mentioned it before, and we'll mention it again. This thing is absolutely incredible, and adding flat 50% damage to a tank commander's main weapon is an incredibly solid buff, and it's worth buying in the entire detachment just for this relic. It's only got better as of the Psychic Awakening book. Now we can get tank ace traits to keep that tank a lot safer, or even just amp up the damage even more if you're feeling gutsy. On top of this, we now have the Relentless Trade, which allows a tank commander to operate on full profile, and the 2 CP one that when you target vehicles, you automatically get a flat 6 shots coming out of it, meaning that this thing is absolutely more viable than ever. There really aren't all that many relics in the game that take a massive gun in your army and just make it flat better. Finally, we come to an old favourite, which is Kirov's Aquila, and this is the command point farming one, where you get a command point on a 5+ each time your opponent uses a stratagem. It's fairly simple, this one. Command points are good, they let us use stratagems, more of them is a good thing. This one's a great relic to be keeping on a company commander who's hiding at the back out of enemy line of sight, such as maybe your warlord just hanging out with some mortars or a backfield support squad, ordering them, keeping safe and farming up some command points. So let me know your opinions on the guard relics. If there's any that I've rated too high or too low, please let me know down in the comments. I know everyone has their own ideas when it comes to this sort of thing, and it can certainly vary a lot army to army too, so I'll certainly be interested in reading the feedback. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. There'll be plenty more Imperial Guard content coming over the next weeks and months. And if you are enjoying these videos, I have a Patreon channel which keeps these videos coming, as they do take a fair bit of time to make. If you are watching regularly, then any contribution is massively appreciated, as the Patreon is what allows me to focus on this channel at the expense of my regular job. And as always, a massive thank you to the Patreons who are helping make this possible. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time.